The morning sun rose over the small town of Riverside on New Terra, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Children laughed and played in the schoolyard, their voices carrying across the peaceful colony. Parents waved goodbye as they headed to work in the farming domes and factories. Nobody expected this ordinary day would become their worst nightmare. Captain Jake Morrison sat in his office at the Colonial Defense Headquarters, reviewing routine reports. His coffee had gone cold, but he didn't notice. The paperwork was boring, which was exactly how he liked it. Boring meant peaceful. Boring meant safe. He had moved to New Terra 5 years ago, hoping for exactly this kind of quiet life. His communication device beeped urgently. The screen showed an emergency code from Riverside Elementary School. Jake's heart jumped. Emergency codes were rare, usually just drills or minor accidents. He grabbed his jacket and ran to his vehicle, calling his team as he drove. The school looked normal from the outside. But when Jake entered the building, he found chaos. Teachers were crying. Some were on their phones, and the principal looked like she might faint. Parents were arriving, their faces showing confusion and growing fear. "What happened?" Jake demanded. The principal, a woman named Helen Carter, could barely speak. The children, 23 of them, they're gone. Jake felt his stomach drop. Gone? What do you mean gone? Helen led him to the security office. The guard there, an older man named Pete, played the surveillance footage with shaking hands. Jake watched the screen carefully. The children had been playing during recess. Everything seemed normal. Then the air itself seemed to tear open. Strange oval-shaped portals appeared in 3 locations across the playground. They shimmered like water but stood upright in the air. Through these portals came creatures that Jake had never seen before. They stood on 2 legs but looked nothing like humans. Their bodies were covered in some kind of armor, or maybe it was their skin. They moved fast, too fast. The creatures carried weapons that fired blue bolts of energy. Children who were hit by these bolts simply fell down. Not injured, but unconscious. The creatures grabbed the sleeping children and dragged them back through the portals. Other children screamed and ran, but the creatures were efficient and quick. In less than 1 minute, 23 children had vanished and the portals closed. Jake watched the footage 3 times, his mind refusing to accept what his eyes saw. This was an alien abduction. Real aliens had come to their colony and stolen their children. Lieutenant Claire Bennett arrived at the school 10 minutes later. She was Jake's second in command, a tough woman who had served in the Earth military before coming to New Terra. But when Jake told her about the missing children, her professional mask cracked. Her nephew Danny was in that school. "Show me," she said, her voice tight. They watched the footage together. Claire saw Danny playing near the swings when a portal opened beside him. She saw the alien stun him and drag his small body through the gateway. Her hands formed fists so tight her knuckles turned white. "We're getting them back," Claire said. It wasn't a question. Jake nodded. "Send word to every colony, every ship, every outpost. Send the footage to Earth. Someone out there knows what these things are." Within 2 hours, the town hall was packed with parents of the missing children. These weren't soft people. New Terra had been settled by pioneers, many of them former military. They had come looking for peace, but they remembered how to fight. Jake looked at their faces and saw anger that burned like fire. A man named Eric Grant stood up. His daughter Sophie was 10 years old and loved building things with her toy blocks. "What's the plan, Captain?" Quote, Jake took a deep breath. "First, we identify what took our children. The footage is being analyzed by experts. Second, we find out where they went. Third, we bring them home. And fourth?" asked a woman named Linda Brooks. Her son Nathan was 12. Jake's voice was hard as steel. "Fourth, we make sure this never happens again." The crowd murmured in agreement. These were parents, ready to go to war. Back at his office, Jake received the first analysis reports. Dr. Alan Pierce, a scientist who studied alien life, sent a message from the orbital station. The energy signatures left behind by the portals matched no known human technology. The biological traces suggested reptilian DNA structures. Most importantly, similar abduction patterns had been reported from other frontier colonies over the past 6 months. This wasn't random. This was organized. Someone was hunting humans. Jake sent an urgent message to Earth Defense Fleet. He marked it Priority Alpha, the highest level. He didn't know if anyone would listen. New Terra was a small colony on the edge of human space. They weren't important in the big picture. But he had to try. The response came faster than expected. Admiral Patricia Cole herself replied within 4 hours. Her message was short but powerful. "We're coming. Hold on." Jake shared the news with the parents. Some cried with relief. Others just nodded, their jaws set. They had expected Earth to help, but knowing help was really coming made it real. That night, Jake stood outside the school, looking at the empty playground. The swings moved slowly in the wind, creaking softly. Tomorrow, this place should be filled with children's laughter. Instead, it was silent like a graveyard. Claire found him there. "I can't stop thinking about Danny," she said quietly. "He's just 8 years old. He's probably so scared." "We'll find him," Jake promised. "We'll find all of them." "What if we're too late?" Jake looked at her. "Then, we make the people who did this regret every second they've lived." News of the abduction spread across the colony overnight. People who had come to New Terra to escape the violence of Earth found themselves facing something worse. But they didn't run. They didn't hide. Instead, they started preparing. Farmers pulled out old weapons from storage. Engineers began building armor for civilian ships. Teachers who had once been soldiers remembered their training. The message was clear. Human children had been. Admiral Patricia Cole stood on the bridge of the Valiant, studying the star charts spread across her display screens. She had commanded ships for 20 years, fought pirates, and defended colonies. But this mission felt different. This was personal, in a way military operations rarely were. Somewhere out in the darkness of space, 23 human children were being held captive by aliens who had made the worst decision of their lives. Commander Lucas Hayes worked at the tactical station, his fingers moving quickly across the controls. He was pulling together every piece of information they had about unknown alien activity in human space. The data painted a disturbing picture. Over the past 6 months, there had been 14 abduction incidents. Adults traveling alone had vanished without a trace. The aliens had been testing human defenses, learning their patterns. "They've been watching us," Lucas said, anger in his voice. "Learning when we're vulnerable." Admiral Cole nodded. "And then they graduated to taking children. They think we're weak." Dr. Alan Pierce entered the bridge carrying a data pad. He was a thin man with gray hair who had spent his whole career studying alien species. His face showed the exhaustion of 3 days, with almost no sleep. But his eyes were sharp as he presented his findings. "I've identified the kidnappers," Alan said. "They're called the Krell. They're a reptilian species from a low-gravity world. They operate as slavers and traders in illegal goods. They've been doing this for hundreds of years across dozens of systems. Why humans?" Admiral Cole asked. "Why now?" Alan pulled up an image on the main screen. It showed a galactic database entry. "Because we're new and we're valuable. Earth is classified as a Class 12 death world. That's one of the highest ratings. Most intelligent life evolves on gentle planets, with low gravity, few predators, and mild weather. Earth is the opposite. High gravity, dangerous animals, extreme weather, diseases, everything that should prevent complex life." Lucas looked confused. "What does that mean for us?" "It means humans are tough," Alan explained. "Your bones are denser than most aliens. Your muscles are stronger. Your immune system can handle things that would kill other species. You heal faster. You can eat foods that are poison to others. To most of the galaxy, humans are like super soldiers who don't know they're special. Admiral Cole understood immediately. So we're exotic merchandise. Exactly. The Krell sell rare creatures to collectors, fighting rings, research facilities. Human children would be especially valuable because they can be trained young. The bridge went silent. Every officer present felt rage building in their chest. These aliens had looked at human children and seen dollar signs. They were about to learn why that was a fatal error. Admiral Cole called a meeting with all ship commanders. They gathered in the conference room, 20 captains representing the military fleet and the civilian volunteers who had joined the rescue. Among them was a man who didn't wear a uniform. Marcus Webb sat quietly in the corner, watching everyone with careful eyes. Marcus had been a spy for Earth intelligence, working undercover in alien criminal networks for 15 years. He knew the dark corners of the galaxy, where law meant nothing and money meant everything. When Admiral Cole needed someone who understood how the Krell operated, his name was the first on the list. He had retired to a quiet moon, trying to forget the terrible things he had seen. But when he heard about the children, he volunteered immediately. "Tell them what you know," Admiral Cole said to Marcus. Marcus stood and faced the assembled commanders. The Krell Consortium isn't just a gang. It's a network that spans 50 star systems. They have connections with corrupt governments, mercenary fleets, and criminal organizations across the galaxy. Their main base of operations is a place called the Nexus. He pulled up a holographic image. A massive space station appeared, floating in the swirling clouds of a nebula. The station was enormous, bigger than some moons. Ships came and went like insects around a hive. The Nexus is located in the Veil Nebula. It's neutral ground for criminals. No government controls it. It's protected by mercenary fleets and defense systems that could fight off an army. For 200 years, it's been considered untouchable. No law enforcement agency has ever successfully raided it. Until now. Admiral Cole said firmly. Marcus smiled. But it wasn't a happy expression. Until now. The children are almost certainly there. The Krell would take them to the Nexus for processing before selling them to buyers. A civilian captain named Eric Grant raised his hand. He was the father of Sophie, one of the missing children. He had no military training, but he had commandeered a cargo ship and followed the fleet. How do we get in? If it's that well defended, a direct attack would take forever. The Krell might kill the children before we reach them. You're right, Marcus agreed. A military assault would be suicide and pointless. But there's another way. I go in undercover with a small team. We pose as buyers interested in Deathworld specimens. We locate the children, mark their position, and signal the fleet. Claire Bennett spoke up immediately. I'm going with you. Admiral Cole shook her head. Lieutenant, you're too emotionally involved. Your nephew is one of the captives. Exactly, Claire said. Which means I have more reason than anyone to make sure this works. I know Danny. If he sees me, he'll trust me. I can keep the children calm when we extract them. Marcus studied Claire carefully. Can you keep your emotions in check? If you lose control at the wrong moment, we all die, and the children stay captive. Claire's voice was steady as stone. I can do this. Another volunteer stepped forward. Sergeant Kyle Murphy had been part of Earth's Special Forces before retiring to the colonies. He was a big man with calm eyes and steady hands. You'll need backup. I'm trained for this kind of operation. 1. Marcus nodded. All right. 3-person team. We go in. We find the children. We get out. The fleet waits at the edge of the nebula. When I send the signal, you come in fast and hard. Admiral Cole looked around the room. Anyone have objections to this plan? Nobody spoke. They all understood the risk, but they also understood the alternative. Without the children's location, they could spend weeks searching the Nexus while the Krell moved or killed their captives. This was the best chance they had. One more thing. Marcus said. When we go in, we have to look like real buyers. That means we need to act like we don't care about the children as people. We have to treat them like merchandise. Can everyone here handle that? The question hung in the air. These were parents and soldiers, people who had sworn to protect children. Pretending to see them as products would be painful. But Claire understood what Marcus was really asking. Could they play the role convincingly enough to fool professional criminals? We'll do what we have to do, Claire said. The meeting ended, and the commanders returned to their ships. The fleet began preparing for the mission. The Valiant moved toward the Veil Nebula, followed by the battle group and the civilian volunteers. They traveled in silence, their ships dark to avoid detection. Jake Morrison was aboard one of the civilian transports with other parents from New Terra. They called themselves the Rescue. Admiral Cole had tried to send them back, but Jake had argued they deserved to be part of saving their own children. Finally, she agreed they could come as auxiliary forces, but they had to follow military orders. Jake accepted the terms. As they traveled through hyperspace, Jake looked at the faces of the other parents. Linda Brooks, whose son Nathan loved wrestling. Eric Grant, whose daughter Sophie built amazing machines from scrap. Helen Park, whose twin daughters Emma and Lily were inseparable. 19 families, 23 children, and they would all fight if necessary. The fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Veil Nebula 3 days later. The swirling clouds of gas and dust filled the view screens. Beautiful and deadly. Somewhere in that cosmic fog was the Nexus. Somewhere in that station were the children. Marcus, Claire, and Kyle boarded a small shuttle designed to look like a private trader's vessel. The shuttle carrying Marcus, Claire, and Kyle emerged from the swirling gases of the Veil Nebula. Before them hung the Nexus, a massive structure that looked like a small city floating in space. Lights blazed from thousands of windows and docking bays. Ships of every size and shape moved around it like insects swarming a hive. This was the dark heart of galactic crime, a place where laws meant nothing and credits meant everything. Marcus guided the shuttle toward one of the commercial docking bays. His hands were steady on the controls, but inside his chest, his heart beat faster. He had been in dangerous situations before, but never had so much been at stake. 23 innocent children were somewhere in that station, scared and alone. "Remember your roles," Marcus said quietly to his companions. "I'm a private buyer representing a wealthy collector. Claire, you're my assistant. Kyle, your hired muscle. We're here to purchase Deathworld specimens. Show no emotion. These criminals respect strength and money. Show weakness, and we're dead." Claire nodded. She wore expensive clothes that made her look like a businesswoman. Her weapon was hidden under her jacket, a small plasma pistol that wouldn't show on basic scans. She had tied her hair back and wore dark glasses. She looked nothing like a military officer. "I'm ready. We. Kyle checked his own concealed weapon. He wore the clothes of a mercenary, tough and practical. "Let's go get those kids." The shuttle docked with a metallic clang. The airlock opened and they stepped into the Nexus. The smell hit them first. It was a mixture of alien body odors, industrial chemicals, and something rotting. The corridor was crowded with beings from dozens of species. Some walked on 2 legs, others on 4 or 6. Some had scales, others had fur or feathers. A few looked almost human, but their eyes gave them away as something else entirely. Marcus led them through the crowds with confidence. He had been here before, years ago during his intelligence work. The Nexus looked the same, still a sprawling maze of corridors and levels where anything could be bought or sold if you had the credits. They passed markets selling weapons, drugs, stolen technology, and things that Marcus couldn't identify. In one alcove, a vendor sold what looked like organs preserved in glowing liquid. In another, someone was auctioning off a small creature that cried piteously in a language nobody understood. Claire's jaw tightened, but she kept walking. They couldn't save everyone. They had to focus on their mission. Marcus stopped at an information kiosk run by a spider-like alien with too many eyes. "I'm looking for Krell brokers. High-end merchandise only." The spider alien studied them with multiple sets of eyes. "You have credits?" Marcus held up a chip containing a substantial amount of money. It was fake, created by Earth intelligence, but it would pass most scans. "Enough for what I want." The spider alien took the chip, scanned it, and handed it back. Level 47, Section 9. Look for Thesic. He handles the exotic inventory. They took an elevator that moved sideways as much as up. The Nexus was built without any clear logic. Sections added over 2 centuries of expansion. When they finally reached level 47, the atmosphere changed. This was not a public market. The corridors were cleaner, quieter. Guards stood at checkpoints. Most of them heavily armed mercenaries from various species. A Krell guard stopped them. He was tall, covered in green scales, with yellow eyes that looked reptilian and cold. "State your business." "Here to see Thesic," Marcus said calmly. "We're buyers." The guard studied them for a moment, then spoke into a communication device. After a brief conversation, in a language that sounded like hissing and clicking, he nodded. "Follow me." They were led through security doors that scanned them for weapons. Claire's hidden pistol was detected, but the guard simply took it and handed her a claim ticket. "You get it back when you leave. Weapons are not allowed in the sales area." Claire felt naked without her gun, but she nodded and followed Marcus deeper into the facility. They passed sealed rooms with reinforced doors. Behind some of those doors, Claire could hear sounds, growls, clicking noises. And once, what might have been crying. She forced herself to stay calm. Danny was here somewhere. She had to believe that. The guard brought them to an office that tried to look elegant, but only managed to look expensive. A large Krell sat behind a desk, his scales darker than the guard's, with rings on several of his clawed fingers. His translator device hung from a chain around his thick neck. "Welcome," the Krell said. His voice translated into English by the device. "I am Thesic. I understand you are interested in acquiring specimens." Marcus sat down without being invited, projecting confidence. "We represent a collector who is interested in unique creatures. Specifically, Deathworld species." Thesic's eyes gleamed with interest. "Deathworlders. Difficult to acquire, expensive to maintain, but very valuable. What exactly does your collector seek?" "Humans," Marcus said flatly. "Young ones, if possible. Easier to train." The room went quiet. Claire felt rage building in her chest, but she controlled it. She had to play her role. This was all an act to find the children. Thesic leaned back in his chair, studying them carefully. "Human children. You understand such merchandise is extremely rare and expensive? Humans are new to the galactic scene. Acquiring them involves considerable risk." "We're aware," Marcus said. "Price is not an issue. Quality is. We want healthy specimens with no damage." Thesic stood and walked to a display screen on the wall. He entered a code and images appeared. Claire's breath caught in her throat. The screen showed cells, and in those cells were the children from New Terra. 23 faces she recognized. They looked scared, but unharmed. She could see Danny sitting in a corner, his arms around a younger child who was crying. "I have just acquired these specimens," Thesic said proudly. "Fresh from a human colony. Ages range from 6 to 12 standard years. All healthy, all undamaged. Perfect for training or research." Marcus stood and examined the screen as if looking at livestock. "How do I know they're legitimate? No diseases? No defects?" "We have full medical scans," Thesic assured him. "Human physiology is fascinating. Did you know their bone density is twice that of similar-sized species from normal worlds? Their immune systems can handle pathogens that would kill most galactic citizens in hours, and their pain tolerance is remarkable. Kyle made a sound like he was impressed. Inside, he wanted to break this creature's neck. But he stayed in character, just a hired guard watching his employer's back. "I want to see them in person," Marcus said. "Before we discuss price." Thesic hesitated. "That's unusual. Most buyers review medical data and video footage. My employer is spending a significant amount of money," Marcus said coldly. "He wants assurance that the product is worth the investment. If you're not willing to show me the merchandise, I can find other sellers." The threat of losing a sale worked. Thesic nodded slowly. "Very well. But you understand security measures will be in place. These are valuable assets." Thesic, "Of course." Thesic led them through more corridors, deeper into the secure section. They passed other cells holding various creatures. Some looked dangerous, with claws and teeth. Others looked intelligent and aware, their eyes showing the misery of captivity. Claire realized that the Nexus was more than just a criminal base. It was a living nightmare where sentient beings were bought and sold like objects. They stopped before a large reinforced door. Through the transparent section, Claire could see a large room that had been divided into sleeping areas. The children were inside, most of them sitting together in small groups. Some were crying. Others sat in silence, their faces showing shock. A few looked angry. Sophie Grant, Eric's 10-year-old daughter, had been working on something near the door. When she saw adults approaching, she quickly hid whatever she had been doing. Claire recognized the behavior. Sophie was trying to figure out how to escape. The children hadn't given up hope. Thesic pressed a button, and the door's transparency became one way. The children couldn't see them anymore. As you can see, all specimens are in excellent condition. The younger ones are crying. But that's normal. They adapt quickly once training begins. Marcus nodded slowly, still playing his role. "How many buyers have expressed interest?" "Several," Thesic said. "A research facility wants to study human adaptation to different environments. A fighting ring has inquired about the older specimens, and a wealthy Draknor diplomat wants a pair as exotic pets." Claire's hands formed fists at her sides. She imagined grabbing the Admiral Cole stood on the bridge of the Valiant when the signal came through. Commander Lucas Hayes confirmed the transmission. "Signal received. We have the children's location. Level 47. Section 9. Marcus and his team are in position. How long until we're in range?" Admiral Cole asked. 18 minutes at maximum burn," Lucas replied. "Make it 12, Admiral Cole ordered. "All ships, prepare for combat. This is not a drill. We are going in." Across the human fleet, crews rushed to battle stations. Weapons, systems powered up. Shield generators hummed to life. Fighter pilots climbed into their cockpits. This was the moment they had been preparing for. 23 human children were waiting for rescue, and an entire criminal empire stood in their way. Jake Morrison felt the ship around him shudder as the engines increased power. The civilian transport had been modified with military-grade weapons by volunteers who knew their way around starship systems. It wasn't a warship, but it could fight. Around him, the other parents checked their equipment. They wore mismatched armor and carried weapons ranging from military rifles to hunting guns. They looked like pirates, not soldiers, but their eyes showed a deadly determination. 5 minutes to the Nexus perimeter, the pilot announced over the intercom. Inside the Nexus, Marcus finished negotiating the price with Thesic. The numbers were ridiculous. Enough money to buy a small moon. But Marcus agreed to everything. Knowing the payment would never happen, he checked his watch casually. The fleet should be arriving any moment. Thesic noticed the gesture. "You seem nervous, buyer." "Just eager to complete the transaction," Marcus said smoothly. "My employer is very particular about timing." Suddenly, alarms began blaring throughout the station. Red lights flashed in the corridors. Thesic's communication device activated with urgent messages in the Krell language. His face changed from greedy satisfaction to confusion, and then to fear. "What's happening?" Marcus asked, pretending ignorance. Thesic looked at him with sudden suspicion. "The station is under attack. Multiple ships approaching at high speed. They're broadcasting human identification codes." Marcus smiled, and it wasn't a friendly expression. Thesic reached for a weapon on his desk, but Kyle moved faster. The big sergeant crossed the room in 2 steps and hit the Krell with a punch that would have killed a normal human. Thesic's scales protected him from serious injury, but the impact sent him crashing into the wall, unconscious. "Time to go," Marcus said, pulling out a small device. He activated it, and the device emitted a signal that jammed the local security systems. Doors began unlocking throughout the section. Claire was already running toward the children's holding cell. The door opened at her approach, the locks disabled by Marcus's jamming device. The children inside looked up in fear and confusion. Claire pulled off her dark glasses so they could see her face clearly. "Danny," she called out to her nephew. The 8-year-old boy's face transformed from fear to joy. "Aunt Claire, listen to me, all of you," Claire said loudly, her voice carrying authority. "I'm Lieutenant Claire Bennett, Colonial Defense Force. We're here to rescue you, but we need to move fast and stay together. Can you do that?" 23 heads nodded. These children had been scared, but they hadn't been broken. Sophie Grant spoke up, her voice steady despite everything she had been through. "We're ready. What do we do?" "Hold hands, form a line, and follow me," Claire ordered. "Kyle will take the rear. If I say run, you run. If I say hide, you hide. Understand?" "Yes, ma'am." Several children answered together. They moved out of the cell and into the corridor. Marcus led the way, his weapon drawn. The jamming device had opened other cells too, and various creatures were escaping into the corridors, adding to the chaos. Alarms screamed, and emergency lights flashed. Krell guards ran past, more concerned with reaching their defensive positions than stopping escapees. Outside the Nexus, the battle had begun. The station's defense systems opened fire on the approaching human fleet. Energy, weapons, and missiles filled the space between the station and the ships. The Nexus had powerful defenses, designed to stop pirates and raiders, but the humans weren't raiders. They were an organized military force, with something that drove them beyond normal tactical thinking. They were fighting for their children. Commander Lucas Hayes coordinated the assault from the Valiant's tactical station. "All ships, focus fire on the shield generators. Fighter wings Alpha and Beta, clear the gun emplacements. Civilian ships, stay back until we've opened a breach." The Valiant's main guns fired, sending beams of concentrated energy into the Nexus's shields. Other ships added their firepower. The shields held, but barely. Warning lights flashed across the station as power systems struggled to handle the assault. Inside the Nexus Command Center, the station's security chief watched in horror as his defenses were systematically destroyed. Who are these humans? They fight like maniacs. They're pushing their ships beyond safe limits. "They're Deathworlders," another officer said quietly. "I warned the Krell that taking their young was a mistake." The security chief opened communication channels to mercenary ships docked at the Nexus. "This is command. We are under attack. All defensive forces, engage the enemy." But the mercenaries hesitated. Fighting off raiders was one thing. Fighting against a species known for their physical toughness and apparent disregard for their own safety was another. Some mercenary captains began undocking, but not to fight. They were running away. Marcus led the children through corridors that became more chaotic with each passing minute. They encountered a group of Krell guards who tried to stop them. Kyle stepped forward, his weapon ready. But then something unexpected happened. Nathan Brooks, the 12-year-old who loved wrestling, pointed at the guards. "Those are the ones who dragged us through the portal." The children's fear transformed into anger. These aliens had taken them from their families, threatened them, treated them like animals, and children, even scared children, could be dangerous when they decided to fight back. Sophie Grant grabbed a metal pipe that had fallen from the damaged ceiling. Other children picked up whatever they could find. The Krell guards saw 24 young humans advancing on them with improvised weapons and suddenly understood why Deathworld children might be dangerous. The guards tried to use stun weapons, but human children who had grown up in Earth's gravity were strong and fast. Nathan tackled one guard with a wrestling move that would have made his coach proud. Sophie hit another with her pipe. The guard's scales protected him from serious injury, but the impact still hurt. More children joined the fight, overwhelming the guards through sheer numbers and fury. Marcus and Kyle watched in amazement as the children took down the guards without help. Claire understood what was happening. These kids had been victims for days. Now, they were taking back their power. It was dangerous, and probably not something they should encourage, but it was also deeply human. "All right, that's enough," Marcus called out. "We need to keep moving." The children stepped away from the defeated guards. Some were breathing hard. Some had tears on their faces, but they all looked more alive than they had in the cell. They had fought back and won. The group reached a docking bay where Marcus's shuttle waited. But the bay doors were sealed, locked down during the emergency. Marcus worked on the control panel, trying to override the locks. Kyle guarded the entrance, his weapon ready. Claire kept the children calm and organized. Outside, Jake Morrison's transport broke through the Nexus's weakened shields. The civilian ship wasn't designed for combat maneuvering, but Jake flew it like he was piloting a fighter. He aimed for a docking bay on level 45, planning to crash through if necessary. "Brace for impact," he warned the parents with him. The transport hit the bay doors at full speed. The doors, designed to withstand pressure differences but not ramming attacks, buckled and tore open. The transport crashed into the bay, its hull scraping against metal surfaces. When it finally stopped, emergency foam sprayed everywhere to seal the breaches. Jake and the rescue team poured out of the damaged ship, weapons ready. They had 2 levels to climb and a section to cross. Nothing would stop them from reaching their children. Admiral Cole watched the tactical display as human ships systematically destroyed the Nexus's defenses. It had taken less than 15 minutes to break through shields that had protected the station for 2 centuries. The human fleet had brought specialized weapons, kinetic impactors that hit Y Marcus, pushed the shuttle's engines to maximum power, weaving through the debris field that surrounded the Nexus. Energy beams from the station's defensive guns flashed past the shuttle, close enough that the children inside could see the blue-white light through the windows. Some of them screamed, others held hands and stayed quiet, trusting the adults to get them to safety. "Valiant, this is Rescue Shuttle Delta," Marcus called over the communication system. "We have the children, and we're taking fire. Could use some help here." Commander Lucas Hayes heard the call and immediately redirected 2 fighter squadrons. "All fighters. Priority target is the shuttle. Provide cover and clear a path to the fleet." Human fighters, small and fast, swept toward the Nexus's gun emplacements. They fired missiles that destroyed the automated turrets targeting Marcus's shuttle. The fighters flew with a precision that came from countless training hours, but also with a desperation that came from knowing children's lives depended on them. Inside the Nexus, Jake Morrison and the rescue team fought their way through corridors filled with fleeing criminals and confused aliens. Jake had a map on his handheld device, showing the location where the children had been held. He didn't know they had already escaped. He only knew he had to reach that cell. They encountered resistance from Krell guards, who tried to establish a defensive line. But the parents of the rescue were not soldiers following rules of engagement. They were mothers and fathers whose children had been stolen. They fought with a fury that terrified the Krell. One guard fired at Eric Grant, the shot grazing his shoulder. Eric barely noticed. He kept advancing, his rifle firing steadily, until the guard went down. The rescue reached level 47 and found the cell empty. For a moment, Jake's heart stopped. Had they been moved? Killed? Then he saw the door was unlocked, and there were signs of a struggle in the corridor. Someone had freed the children, and they had fought their way out. "They're not here," Linda Brooks said, her voice showing fear. "Where are they?" Jake studied the corridor, looking for clues. He saw small footprints in the dust, leading away from the cell. 23 children, heading toward the docking bays. Smart kids. They were trying to escape on their own. "They're heading for the docking areas," Jake said. The rescue team moved quickly, following the trail. They found unconscious Krell guards and damaged security equipment. The children had not gone quietly. Jake felt a surge of pride despite the situation. These kids were survivors. In space, Marcus's shuttle finally broke free of the Nexus's defensive range. The Valiant's massive bulk appeared ahead, and Marcus felt relief wash over him. They had done it. The children were safe. He glanced back at the passenger compartment where Claire was checking each child for injuries. Most were just scared and exhausted. A few had minor cuts and bruises, but they were alive. Danny Bennett looked up at his aunt. "Are we really safe now?" Claire hugged him tightly. "Yes, baby. You're safe." Admiral Cole watched on her screens as the shuttle docked with the Valiant. Medical teams were standing by, along with counselors trained to help traumatized children. But first, she had a job to finish. The Nexus had to be destroyed. This place had caused too much suffering for too long. "All ships, pull back to safe distance," Admiral Cole ordered. "Prepare kinetic impactor. Maximum yield." The Valiant's weapon system charged with enormous power. The kinetic impactor was a simple weapon, but devastating. It was essentially a large metal rod, accelerated to a significant fraction of light speed. When it hit a target, the kinetic energy released was equivalent to a nuclear weapon, but without the radiation. Commander Lucas Hayes monitored the charging sequence. "Impactor ready, Admiral?" "Target locked on the Nexus's main reactor core." Quote, "Fire," Admiral Cole said quietly. The impactor launched. Invisible to the naked eye because of its incredible speed, it crossed the distance to the Nexus in less than a second and struck the station's reactor with unimaginable force. The explosion that followed lit up the Veil Nebula like a new star being born. The Nexus, which had stood for 200 years as a symbol of criminal power, was destroyed in an instant. The shockwave from the explosion rocked the human ships even at their safe distance. But they held position, their shields absorbing the energy. When the light faded, nothing remained of the Nexus except an expanding cloud of debris. Inside the Valiant, the children felt the ship shake from the distant explosion. Some were frightened. But Sophie Grant looked out a window and saw the fireball in the distance. She understood what it meant. The place where they had been prisoners was gone. Nobody else would be taken there. "Good," Sophie said quietly. Other children nodded in agreement. Jake Morrison was still inside the station when the warning came. The Valiant's computers had calculated the explosion's shockwave and determined that anyone still aboard the Nexus had less than 2 minutes to evacuate. Jake's communication device screamed the warning. "All personnel, evacuate immediately. Station destruction imminent." The rescue team ran for their damaged transport. They had come to save their children, but the children were already safe. Now, they just needed to save themselves. They reached the docking bay and piled into the transport. Jake fired up the engines, not bothering with pre-flight checks. There was no time. The transport lifted off, its damaged hull groaning in protest. Jake flew through the same hole they had made on entry, pushing the engines past safe limits. Behind them, the Nexus began tearing itself apart as secondary explosions spread through its structure. They cleared the station with seconds to spare. Jake watched in his rear view as the massive structure collapsed in on itself, pulled apart by its own internal explosions. The transport was caught by the edge of the shockwave, spinning wildly. Jake fought for control, his hands steady on the controls, despite the chaos. "Hold on," he shouted to his passengers. The transport tumbled through space, systems failing, hull breaches spreading. But it held together, Just long enough. Human rescue ships reached them and locked on with tractor beams, pulling the damaged transport to safety. When they finally docked with a medical ship, Jake and the rescue team stumbled out, bruised and exhausted, but alive. The battle was over. The Nexus was destroyed. The children were safe, but the cost had been high. 3 human ships had been destroyed in the fighting. 47 crew members had died. Hundreds more were injured. The damaged ships would take months to repair, but when Admiral Cole looked at the 23 children safe aboard her flagship, she knew it had been worth it. Every life lost had been in service of protecting innocent children. Those sailors had died as heroes. The fleet began the journey home, traveling slowly because of the damaged ships. In the Valiant's medical bay, doctors checked the children thoroughly. Physically, they were mostly fine. A few had lost weight from poor food in captivity. Some had bruises, but nothing permanent. The psychological trauma would take longer to heal, but Earth's best counselors were already on their way to New Terra to help. Claire sat with Danny in the medical bay, holding his hand while a doctor examined him. "Did I do good, Aunt Claire?" Danny asked. "When we fought the guards?" Claire thought about her answer carefully. "You survived, baby. That's what matters. You stayed strong and you came home. I was scared." Danny admitted quietly. "Being scared doesn't mean you weren't brave," Claire said. "Bravery is being scared, but doing what needs to be done anyway. You were very brave." In another part of the ship, Marcus Webb sat alone in an observation room, watching the stars pass by. He had saved the children, but he couldn't save all the other beings they had seen in the Nexus's cells. They had died in the explosion. Still trapped. Still suffering. He knew the destruction was necessary, but it still bothered him. Kyle Murphy found him there. The big sergeant sat down without asking permission. "You did good work today." "Did I?" Marcus asked. "We killed thousands of beings when we destroyed that station. We killed criminals who made their living from suffering," Kyle corrected. "We destroyed a place where innocent beings were bought and sold. Sometimes the only way to stop evil is to destroy it completely." Marcus nodded slowly. He knew Kyle was right, but the weight of command never got easier. He had given the signal that brought the fleet to battle. His actions had caused those deaths. He would carry that responsibility for the rest of his life. But when he thought about 23 children safely heading home to their families, he knew he would make the same choice again. Admiral Cole sent a message to Earth, reporting the successful rescue and the destruction of the Nexus. The response came from the highest levels of human government. They were proud of the rescue but concerned about the galactic response. Destroying the Nexus would send shockwaves through the criminal underworld. But it would also show the galaxy what humans were capable of when pushed. Commander Lucas Hayes brought the concern to Admiral Cole. "Some admirals on Earth are worried we went too far, that we showed too much force." Admiral Cole looked at him steadily. "Do you think we went too far?" Lucas thought about the question. He remembered seeing the children's faces on Thessic's screen, scared and alone. He remembered the cells full of captive beings, the markets selling living creatures, the casual cruelty of the Krell. "No, Admiral. I don't think we went far enough. We should hunt down every member of the Krell consortium who was involved." "That's exactly what we're going to do," Admiral Cole said. "I've already sent hunter teams after the Krell ships that escaped the Nexus. This isn't over until every single being who participated in taking those children is brought to justice." News of the Nexus's destruction spread through the galaxy faster than light travel. The criminal underworld watched in shock as their supposedly untouchable fortress was reduced to debris. Species who had operated in the shadows for centuries suddenly felt exposed and vulnerable. The Krell consortium tried to regroup, but they found their network collapsing. Nobody wanted to do business with the species that had provoked humanity's wrath. Krell ships were hunted across dozens of star systems by human forces that seemed to appear from nowhere. One by one, the slavers were captured or killed. Thessic, the broker who had proudly displayed human children as merchandise, was found hiding on a remote moon. A human special forces team captured him and brought him back to Earth for trial. He faced charges not just for the New Terra children but for thousands of other crimes across centuries. The trial was broadcast across the galaxy, a clear message about what happened to those who trafficked in sentient beings. On New Terra, the colony prepared for the children's 3 months after the rescue. Life on New Terra slowly returned to normal. The children attended school again. Though now, security was much tighter. Armed guards patrolled the grounds. Sensors monitored for unauthorized portal activity. The colony had learned a harsh lesson about vulnerability, and they would not be caught unprepared again. The galactic community's reaction to the Nexus's destruction was mixed and complicated. Some species praised humanity for destroying a criminal stronghold that had operated with impunity for centuries. Others condemned the use of such overwhelming force. Several governments filed formal complaints about humans taking unilateral military action in neutral space. Admiral Cole attended a meeting of the Galactic Security Council, a body that claimed to maintain order among spacefaring civilizations. She stood before representatives from 40 different species, many of whom looked at her with suspicion or fear. The lead counselor, a being from a species called the Verath, who resembled a tall blue crane, addressed her formally. Admiral Cole, the Council acknowledges that your children were taken by criminals. However, your response was disproportionate. The Nexus, while imperfect, served as a buffer zone that kept worse elements contained. By destroying it, you have created a power vacuum that threatens stability. Admiral Cole listened politely, her face showing no emotion. When the counselor finished, she spoke clearly so her words would be recorded and transmitted across the galaxy. With respect, Counselor, I disagree completely. The Nexus was not a buffer. It was a cancer. For 200 years, your governments knew that sentient beings were being bought and sold there. You knew children of various species were being trafficked. You knew terrible crimes were being committed. And you did nothing because it was easier to look away than to take action. The council chamber erupted in protests. Several representatives demanded she show proper respect. But Admiral Cole continued speaking, her voice rising above the noise. Humanity is new to the galaxy, but we learn fast. We've learned that many of you value stability over justice. You value trade, relationships over morality. Well, let me make humanity's position clear. Anyone who threatens human children, who takes them for slavery, or profit, or any other reason, will face the full force of our civilization. We don't care about your politics or your trade agreements. We care about protecting our young. The Verath counselor tried to interrupt, but Admiral Cole kept speaking. The Krell Consortium took 23 children from a peaceful colony. They saw these children as merchandise. They thought humans would negotiate, maybe pay a ransom, and then move on. They were wrong. We will never move on. Every member of that organization who participated in the kidnapping has been hunted down. The few who remain alive are in our prisons, and they will stay there for the rest of their lives. This is exactly the aggressive attitude we feared, another counselor said. Humanity is too violent, too emotional. You cannot let passion drive your military decisions. Admiral Cole smiled, but it wasn't a warm expression. You call it passion. We call it justice. And if standing up for our children makes us too violent for your council, then we'll operate outside your rules. We tried doing things the official way. We filed reports about the abductions. We asked for help investigating. Most of you ignored us. So, we helped ourselves. The meeting ended badly, with several species threatening to limit trade with human colonies. But others, species who had also suffered from the Krell's crimes, approached Admiral Cole privately. They thanked her for doing what their own governments had been too afraid to attempt. Some offered to share intelligence about other criminal networks. Back on New Terra, the children were adjusting to their new reality. Sophie Grant had nightmares about being trapped in the cell, but therapy was helping. She had also developed a new interest in self-defense, attending classes taught by Claire Bennett. If anyone ever tried to take her again, Sophie wanted to be ready. Nathan Brooks had become protective of the younger children, especially Danny Bennett. The two had formed a close friendship during their captivity, and Nathan still felt responsible for looking out for his friend. His mother, Linda, worried he was growing up too fast, but she was also proud of the young man her son was becoming. Danny Bennett struggled more than most of the other children. He had been the youngest in the cell, and the experience had changed him. He didn't laugh as much anymore. He startled easily at loud noises. But Claire visited him every week, and slowly, he was starting to be a kid again. She brought him books and told him stories about her own time in the military, how being scared was normal, and how courage meant going on, despite the fear. The twins, Emma and Lily Park, refused to be separated even for a moment. They held hands constantly, slept in the same room, and sat together at school. Their parents understood. The girls had been taken together and had survived together. That bond would last their whole lives. Across human space, the response to the rescue had created a surge of unity. Colonies that had been isolated and independent suddenly felt part of something larger. They were all human, all part of a species that would cross the galaxy to protect each other. Defense forces expanded. New security protocols were implemented. Humans were no longer naive newcomers to the galactic community. They had learned the galaxy could be dangerous, and they were preparing accordingly. Marcus Webb returned to his quiet retirement. But he found he couldn't fully step away from the work. He became a consultant for Earth intelligence, helping them understand the criminal networks that operated in the dark corners of space. His knowledge helped prevent several other abduction attempts. He never sought recognition or praise. He just wanted to make sure no other children would suffer what those 23 had endured. Kyle Murphy stayed with the military, training special forces teams in hostage rescue operations. He developed new tactics based on what they had learned at the Nexus. His training program became standard across all human military branches. When new recruits asked why the training was so intense, he told them about 23 children who had been taken but came home. That was all the motivation the recruits needed. Jake Morrison received a promotion to major and took command of New Terra's expanded defense force. He built a network of early warning sensors around the colony and established protocols for rapid response to any threat. Under his leadership, New Terra became one of the most secure colonies in human space. But he never forgot how close they had come to losing their children forever. Claire Bennett continued serving in the military, but she also became an advocate for better protection of human colonies. She testified before the Earth government about the need for faster response times and better intelligence gathering. Her nephew Danny was her inspiration. Every time she spoke to officials who wanted to cut defense spending, she thought about his scared face in that cell and found the words to convince them. The Krell species faced consequences that went beyond just the consortium. Their entire civilization became pariahs in the galactic community. No species wanted to trade with them or allow them in their space. The Krell government, which had officially condemned the consortium but had secretly profited from their crimes, was forced to pay massive reparations to humanity and other affected species. Their economy collapsed, and their influence in galactic affairs disappeared. Other criminal organizations learned from the Krell's mistake. Word spread through the underworld that humans were off limits, especially human children. A new rule emerged in the galaxy's shadows: never, ever touch a human youngling. The price was too high, but humanity wasn't satisfied with just being feared. Admiral Cole pushed for galactic reforms to protect all children, not just humans. She worked with species who shared her values to establish new laws against trafficking and slavery. It was slow work, and many governments resisted. But progress was being made. The destruction of the Nexus had created an opportunity for change. 1 year after the rescue, New Terra held a memorial service for the 47 crew members who had died in the battle. The entire colony attended. The children who had been rescued stood together as Admiral Cole read the names of the fallen. Each name was followed by the tolling of a bell. When the last name was read, Sophie Grant stepped forward with a prepared speech. "These people died to save us," Sophie said, her voice carrying across the silent crowd. They didn't know us. Most of them had never even been to New Terra. But when they heard that human children were in danger, they came. They flew into battle knowing they might not come back. And some of them didn't. We will never forget them. We will live our lives in a way that honors their sacrifice. The crowd stood in silence for a long minute, honoring the fallen. Then, slowly, life returned to normal. The memorial ended, people went back to their homes, and New Terra continued being a peaceful farming colony. But everyone there knew that peace was precious and fragile, and sometimes it had to be defended with force. The 23 children grew up carrying the weight of their experience. Some became soldiers, wanting to protect others from what they had endured. Sophie Grant became an engineer, designing better security systems for colonies. Nathan Brooks joined the Colonial Defense Force and specialized in hostage rescue. The twins, Emma and Lily, became teachers, working with traumatized children and helping them heal. Danny Bennett took longest to find his path. The trauma had hit him harder than most because he was youngest. But eventually, with Claire's help and his family's support, he found purpose. He became a psychologist specializing in childhood trauma. He used his own experience to help other children who had faced terrible things. He couldn't change what happened to him, but he could help others survive their own nightmares. Years passed, and the story of the Nexus became legendary across human space. Parents told their children about the 23 who were taken and brought home. Military academies studied the battle as an example of rapid response and overwhelming force used in defense of civilians. The date of the rescue became an unofficial holiday in many colonies, a day to celebrate the courage of those who fought and remember those who died. In the wider galaxy, humanity's reputation changed permanently. They were no longer seen as naive newcomers to be exploited. They were respected as a species that would go to extreme lengths to protect their own. Some species feared them. Others admired them. But everyone understood that humanity's children were untouchable. The Galactic Security Council eventually passed new laws against trafficking, largely because of pressure from Admiral Cole and her allies. The laws had teeth, with enforcement mechanisms that actually worked. Criminal networks that had operated for centuries found themselves under attack from multiple species working together. The galaxy wasn't perfect, but it was getting better. Admiral Cole retired after 30 years of service, having risen to the highest rank in Earth's military. In her retirement speech, she talked about the moment that defined her career, standing on the bridge of the Valiant and ordering the destruction of the Nexus. She had been prepared for the decision to haunt her, to regret the death she caused. But she never did. Some places in the universe needed to be destroyed, and some enemies needed to be defeated completely. There was no shame in that. Marcus Webb lived to be an old man, dying peacefully in his sleep at age 87. His funeral was attended by hundreds of people whose lives he had saved through his intelligence work. The 23 children, now adults, all came to pay their respects. Without his knowledge of the criminal underworld, the rescue might have failed. They owed him their lives. On New Terra, a monument was erected in the center of Riverside. It showed a group of children holding hands, looking up at the stars. At the base were two plaques. One listed the names of the 23 children who were taken. The other listed the names of the 47 crew members who died in their rescue. The monument's inscription was simple. They came home because others were willing to fight. The children who had been taken were old adults now, with children and grandchildren of their own. They still met every year on the anniversary of their rescue, gathering at the monument to remember and honor what happened. They talked about their experiences, helping each other process trauma that never fully went away. But they also celebrated life, grateful for every day they had been given. Sophie Grant's granddaughter once asked her what it was like to be kidnapped by aliens. Sophie thought carefully about her answer. "It was the worst thing that ever happened to me," she said, honestly. "But it taught me something important. It taught me that humans don't abandon each other. When we were taken, the entire species came looking for us. Ships from colonies we had never heard of joined the rescue. Soldiers who didn't know our names died to save us. That's what it means to be human. We're a family, all of us, across all the stars. That was humanity's true power, the thing that made them unique in the galaxy. It wasn't their strength, or their technology, or their ability to survive harsh environments. It was their absolute, unshakable commitment to protecting their young. Other species had laws and policies about child welfare. Humans had something deeper, something primal that went back to their evolution. On a dangerous world where survival meant protecting the tribe's children at all costs. The galaxy had learned that lesson the hard way. The Krell Consortium had made a simple mistake. They saw human children as vulnerable prey. They didn't understand that taking a human child meant declaring war on the entire species. They wrote their own doom the moment they opened those portals on New Terra, and the galaxy would never forget. Humanity had announced themselves to the galactic community not through diplomacy or trade agreements, but through an act of overwhelming protective fury. They had shown what happened when you threatened what they held most precious. The message was received, understood, and remembered by every civilization among the stars. Human children were off limits. Return. The town of Riverside had been quiet and sad since the kidnapping. But now banners hung across the streets. People lined the roads from the spaceport to the town center. When the shuttle carrying the children finally landed, the entire colony was there to welcome them home. 23 children walked down the shuttle's ramp, holding hands with each other and with the adults who had rescued them. Parents rushed forward, crying and laughing at the same time. Danny Bennett ran into his mother's arms. Sophie Grant hugged her father, Eric. Nathan Brooks was lifted up by his mother, Linda. The twins, Emma and Lily Park, were surrounded by their family. It was a moment of pure joy, but also bittersweet. These children had seen things no child should see. They had been taken from safety and thrust into nightmare. They would carry those memories forever. But they were home, and they were loved, and that would help them heal. The force of nuclear explosions but left no radiation. Target their power generators, Admiral Cole ordered. I want this station crippled. The Valiant fired again, and one of the Nexus's main reactors went offline. Lights flickered throughout the massive station. Emergency power kicked in, but it wasn't enough. The Nexus was dying. In the docking bay, Marcus finally got the doors open. Everyone in the shuttle, now. The children scrambled aboard, followed by Claire and Kyle. Marcus took the pilot seat and started the engines. But before they could launch, the bay doors began closing again. Someone in the station's command had overridden his hack. The shuttle lifted off the deck, racing toward the closing doors. It was going to be close. The gap narrowed as the shuttle accelerated. At the last second, the shuttle burst through, its hull scraping the doors with a screech of metal on metal. They were out, flying through the chaos of the battle. But they weren't safe yet. The Nexus still had defensive guns, and some were targeting the small shuttle carrying the rescued children. SSIK by his scaly throat and squeezing until his translator device stopped working. But Marcus gave her a subtle hand signal. Stay calm. Not yet. I'll take all 23, Marcus said. Name your price. Thesik's eyes widened with surprise and greed. All of them? That's quite an acquisition. My employer wants a breeding population for long-term study. Money is no object. As Thesik began calculating the enormous price, Marcus subtly activated a small device in his pocket. It sent a signal through the station's infrastructure, too weak to be detected by security systems, but strong enough to reach the shuttle they had arrived in. The shuttle's computer received the signal and immediately transmitted a powerful burst toward the edge of the nebula. Far away in the darkness, the Valiant detected the signal. Admiral Cole had the location of the children. It was time to bring her fleet to war. They wore civilian clothes and carried forged identification documents that cost a small fortune on the black market. Admiral Cole watched them go, knowing she was sending them into terrible danger. "Good hunting," she said over the communication channel. "We'll bring them home," Marcus replied. The shuttle disappeared into the nebula, heading toward the heart of the criminal empire. Behind them, the fleet waited in the darkness. Every ship was ready for battle. Every weapon was charged. Every person aboard knew what was at stake. The mission to rescue the children had begun, and nothing would stop them now. Taken. The colony wasn't just going to wait for rescue. They were going to fight. 3 days later, a fleet of military ships arrived in orbit. The flagship was called the Valiant, and it carried Admiral Cole and her battle group. But behind the military ships came something else. Civilian transports from other colonies, filled with volunteers who had heard about the kidnapping. Parents from across human space who understood what New Terra was feeling. Jake watched the ships arrive and felt hope for the first time since the abduction. Humanity was coming together. The aliens who took those children had made a terrible mistake. They had attacked the young of a species that would cross the galaxy to protect their own. The rescue mission was about to begin, and the galaxy was about to learn what happened when you threatened human children.